Hops Geek News. We are a podcast that talks about comic books, movies, TV shows, and of course, if you've listened to us before, we usually drink a nice, delicious craft beer. However, this episode in particular, I am not because it's 10 in the morning where I'm at, and I got to go pick the kids up later. So, and Lauren's not here. So, surprise, Lauren is out on this episode. Just going to be me. However, I do have a special guest today. But first things first, if you have not know where to find us and happen to stumble upon us, go ahead, go to our website, hopsnews.beer, where you can find all of the articles that we have been writing. I recently put out a new pool list, which I talked about Star Wars Brotherhood, the novel. And then also Lauren is just pumping out some amazing Disney content because she lives the better of the two lives out of us and goes to Disney every day. And also you can find our episodes there as well. And if you don't want to go there, go ahead, search Hops News on any podcasting platform. Go ahead, go to Twitter, Hops Geek News. Go ahead, Instagram, same thing. And then, yes, even though we are old, we are on TikTok as well because reasons. And same thing, Hops Geek News there. And then also we have a Facebook group now. So if you want to search us, Hops Geek News on Facebook as well, if we still use that. And my excuse of using Facebook is so I don't have to actually call my family. I can just post pictures of my kids. So with that said, really good episode today. We have a Guinness World Record holder on tap here. Dustin Nelson from Thrillist is coming on. He's talking about a fantastic new comic, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. There's no news today, no kind of what we've been reading or watching. We will be saving that for next week to kind of let some things breathe out there in the world because we are so blessed with content. That and also Herogasm is about to premiere, and we definitely have to talk about that. So that said, Dustin, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm doing well. I mean, I'm aware of the time of day that I've only recently woken up and that I don't usually start a beer yet. But I mean, just for the sake of continuity.
Oh, man. Yes.
I made a pick of a beer that I will drink tonight so that the world feels whole. I grabbed a Night Witch from Lupulin. I've been holding on to this for 3 years. Seemed like a good occasion for it because it wasn't like I don't age my imperial stouts intentionally. I just don't drink them sometimes.
Oh yeah.
But it was partly because Lupulin's Minnesota. I'm living in Minnesota, and they're awesome. But this is a horrible introduction to me because I'm just introducing a beer. But
no, this is perfect. It's the "What are you drinking?" segment. You're bring it.
And they have a description of why it's called Night Witch on the side. And I first had it with one of the brewers there because they brew it all night, or the boil takes all night. And then they have this like just great blurb on here. It's crafted in honor of the brave female pilots who flew combat missions for the Soviet Union. During the Second World War, they were only allowed to fly in outdated wooden biplanes instead of against the Germans. So these women had to fly, and they had wooden planes, and because they were like so rickety, you could only do it at night, and they would have to shut off their engines and just glide because they were also very loud.
Dang.
So they earned the name Night Witch from the Germans because it sounded like a witch was flying overhead because there'd just be this whooshing air and no engine.
That's actually badass. I have briefly heard about that, but that's really kind of cool. And then also kind of hilarious. That's like, yeah, you can just go ahead and take any plane you want, except for the working ones.
Yeah. It's like nice that they're like honoring it, but you're also like highlighting like, yeah, that's not awesome. Like visually, like I want to put that in a comic book, but I don't want anyone to have to fly a wooden plane that they can't have the engines on.
Right, especially in a combat zone like World War II of all places.
Yeah. So of course I'm like, oh, this will be a great story, and then you're like, I know all about planes. You aren't going to tell me something I don't know.
No, actually, hey, I love all the different expertise, and I love that you brought a beer because I thought about doing that this morning too, but then I was like, I don't want to be judged too harshly for popping out a beer because normally what I would do too, I'm with you, is Imperial Stouts. They're one of my favorite styles of beer, and I also don't age them intentionally, but I've probably got like 6 in my fridge that I've just been sitting on because it's, to me, I like to pull them out on special occasions. And so it's right. Like, when's the right moment?
Yeah. That's I don't know why I decided this was the most, because I had 3 of these and I like them. So I was kind of glad I've got a little bit of an aged one. But I just love Lupulin too. And it's a great brewery.
I've heard a lot of good things about the beer scene in Minnesota. I've only flown through Minneapolis. I've never really gotten to explore or things of that nature. What's kind of the beer scene up there?
It's awesome. I mean, there are a lot of great breweries, kind of no matter where you are. I'm in Minneapolis, and there's obviously breweries in Minneapolis and St. Paul and kind of the surrounding area. But Lupulin's a little further north in Big Lake. They're really great. There's up near Duluth, and even if you start getting closer to the Boundary Waters, there's still great breweries. I mean, it's a cool scene for that. Also because I think there's just some excellent like things happening in beer, with all the unionization that's taken place in beer. One of like the forerunners of that was Fair State here, who voluntarily recognized their union super quickly, and have just like become this awesome union craft beer shop. And Fair State like has outstanding beers, and they're very, everything they do is just seems like it's so tapped in and like locked in. It's great.
It's always great when you see those breweries, and you almost don't intentionally mean to just like this brewery that's like banger after banger, and people are like, all right, you say that about, but no, they actually are killing it out there. Cause I do the same thing with certain breweries. And so I've always wanted to make time to go up there, because we kind of talked before the show about how I'm a Packer fan and stuff like that. So I've always wanted to make time to go up there, catch a football game. I know in hostile environment, but I kind of want to hit up like the NHL stadiums and the NFL stadiums, kind of do that and then experience the beer scene, because I've heard so much. So that's pretty rad to hear that it's such a booming area for that.
Yeah, and there's some big breweries, but yeah, there's just so many really good kind of mid-sized breweries like Modest and Fair State. Yeah, it's super fun area for that. And it's craft beer, so I mean, like, if you're in an area that doesn't have great craft beer, it's maybe more surprising. But I think Minneapolis has a really underrated, like, exceptional thing. Right. I was actually last summer was in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and went to Alpha Brewing. And Alpha is, and I mess up the how this is worded. It's the brewery that's in the smallest town in the U.S., I believe. Like the smallest town that has a craft brewery. It's a town of like 150 people.
Oh wow!
But even there, I was like, oh, you guys have really good beer. Like
you guys like crushing it out here. Yeah,
like kind of off in the middle of nowhere, but super nice. Yeah.
I love that, because you can go to the middle of nowhere, and that also speaks to craft beer's reach. Sometimes there's a town of 5 people and they absolutely have their own craft brewery here, and it slays at the same time.
Yeah, and it was super busy. Like the whole town was like empty streets, and you get to the brewery and the patio's packed. You can't get there.
It's the spot to go. Everybody knows everybody, and like, hey, I'll see you there later on.
Yeah, it totally had that vibe. It was awesome.
Nice. Now, I know that you do a little bit of beer writing, talking about whiskey and things for various publications, such as your current one, Thrillist, which I want to get to later. Definitely. First things first, though, is I got to know. I know what it is, but tell the people, Guinness World Record holder, what's that all about?
Yeah, it's a weird side note to an art project. It was a performance art piece I did at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. I wasn't actually living here then, but had kind of arranged it with them. And so the performance was just clapping. And so it had to happen for some amount of time, and it was always going to be a long time, was kind of the idea, like immerse yourself in it as noise, and also, the connotations of it. And okay, so we don't have to go into like the artist statement of it here, but there was clapping, and everyone was able to participate, and we did it for, I think it was 2 hours and 34 minutes.
Wow.
Which set a Guinness record for the longest applause. So yeah, I have sometimes forget about that part of it, and then pop up in articles of people being like, "Here's like 5 Guinness records you could totally break." Like
it's like the most.
Then there I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's so obscure though. I love the obscurity. What gave you that idea to be like, you know what? Let's get a bunch of people together and let's just clap for 2 hours, like we just got out of the Morbius movie.
I had been doing some kind of long form performance art pieces for a bit of like had one I did with a live band where we described Battleship Potemkin with a live score. So it was kind of an inverse of like a silent movie. It was only the sound of the movie. But I also worked in live music at that point. So it was like, it was on my mind as like, there's this absence of applause and like doing these long pieces and like kind of creates a different atmosphere. And then my office was basically on the other side of a wall of constant noise and applause at a music venue. So it kind of just slowly germinated as like, okay, so what if we like just the applause didn't stop? Or what if we were on stage and the applause was the show? And yeah, it just kind of kept developing from there, and was lucky. And they only ended up putting my name on this, on the Guinness thing, but really it was a lot of people. And there was a good handful of people friends from Minneapolis and artists who helped me develop it, they kept it going. They were all over filming. It seems really simple, and it took a huge team of people to put it together, really, which I, super grateful to them
right. For I don't doubt it.
Calling up people and being like, dude, I'm gonna got a project. I'd love to work with you. They're like, yeah, cool. That's great. Let's tell me more about it. And like, we're going to clap until our hands are bruised. So it was awesome. Those people I love them forever for just being like, okay. Yeah, let's do this. I can do this.
They're like, this is weird, but you know what? I'm kind of into it. Let's do it. Let's go. Yeah.
When else are you going to do this?
That's so rad. And it hasn't been broken yet. I mean, you just talked about like the simple things, the world records that you can break. If it's so simple, nobody has done it yet.
I have definitely also just gotten messages or been tagged in people's social media posts. Like, this stupid record, we could do this tonight. I'm like, yeah, we can do it. I have no hold of this. Go for it. It'll be awesome.
I love the competition. I mean, sure, if that's what you're willing to do and be like, hey, I mean, by all means, go ahead. But then again, they talk the big game and nobody just has done it yet. So
yeah, I also kind of love the idea of, we've only ever performed that once. It was probably about 7 years ago now. But I love the idea of, conceptually, if it prompts people to do this and it keeps applause going somehow, it kind of becomes part of the project as this living thing. When you're just like, yeah, you're going to bury yourself in this applause and like it wheels it forward. I'd love to lose that record to someone. Go for it.
Yeah. And it's clapping, but at the same time, it's art. Like you said, it kind of transforms and it keeps going through all these forms of media and people being like, really, that's what this is? It's clapping. Okay. But not for anything. But if you're clapping for 2.5 hours, that you're tired. Like, come on. You think anybody can just clap for 2.5 hours? No way.
It was very tiring. And that was the first time I'd done that. I mean, we did some preparation and clapped for a long time, but not that much. But it was also, it had kind of this beautiful ebb and flow of like, sometimes you're clapping to make sure it doesn't stop because you can't stop. But also like, some people would walk up, because we did it outdoors, and they'd walk up and just kind of be like, what the hell is going on? And just start joining in.
They start clapping with no idea what's happening. Like, what?
Yeah, and you get a group, a couple, some kids come up and just kind of join, or you'd get a group of rowdy people who'd be like, yeah, we're going to hoot and holler and scream now. And like, that created this kind of dynamic, like living thing that had a real flow to it.
Again, that's what art does.
Yeah, and that was totally a planned part of it, was hoping that we could, that's going to change. And sometimes you're tired and it's this just quiet continuation of the applause, and other times like people are going to go a little crazy. And that was definitely like the case as it got toward the end too. Like people were getting excited and we're like, we're actually going to do this.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And this kind of translates, speaking of art, then we're here to talk about a comic book you wrote. So first things first, though, we got to know, what was your comic book origin story? What got you into comic books? What got you into writing?
Yeah, so I always wrote kind of like a poetry collection. I don't know, it's what I went to school for. I've written for some like comedy shows and just kind of edited a literary magazine and kind of been all around writing always. But I read comics some as a kid, but it was always that like a different time. Like, I don't know, I grabbed this 5-pack because this is what I could get. So now I'm reading X-Men. And I came back to it so it was kind of hit and miss. I read graphic novels here and there in my reading, and but wasn't like really burying myself in it again until about 2007 or so. And picked up a bunch of creator-owned comics that just like I started just kind of like, oh, you know what? I'm like deeply back into this of like, was at that point, The Unwritten by Paul Carey and Sweet Tooth,
Sweet Tooth,
Kick-Ass. Were a few of those. Is one called The Unknown Soldier too? I think I have that wrong. But yeah, those were some of them right around then that I was just like, you know what, I'm going to start. I walked by Forbidden Planet every day on the way to work at a music venue and was like, all right, I'm just going to pop in finally. And then, yeah, just kind of was like, oh yeah, I'm back into comics. I love this.
It's that feeling. Yeah. Like you just kind of something about walking into a comic book shop. It just feels magical because there's so many stories that can help you escape from reality at the same,
Yeah. Yeah. And that comic book shop experiences, I think Forbidden Planet might have had something to do with that of like luring me in. Cause I love my comic book shop right now, but it's very no frills, which is actually part of what I love about it is just like, go in there and find your stuff, get out. At Forbidden Planet's like, Disneyland for comic books. It's like, and at that point too, they were on this weird, different location than they are now. And it was this weird corner that just had big glass windows full of like dress up heroes and toys and, which isn't totally my thing, but I was like, I mean, how do you not want to go into the store? I mean, this is like,
yeah, you're like, what's going on over here?
They just put a bunch of stuff in a window you like, and they're like, yeah, try not coming in. Just keep walking past. And
good luck, bud.
Yeah. So it was great and then became dangerous because it was, just you go by the next day and you're like, yeah, well, maybe I'll just grab another issue or two.
It's addicting. Yeah.
At least now I have to have like this mental process. I could just fall into buying more comics then, which was great, but well, no kids then and disposable income. I'm like, I want to just buy a bunch of comic books.
God, those were the days before kids and I just would spend my money on Legos and comic books. And now it's like, wait, my children want Legos now too and comic books. What is this? And I got to share and the glory days.
It's true. I don't want to share my comics with my kids. I do. But he's like, it's me first.
I'm reading it and then I'm going to hold it while you read it so you don't damage the goods.
Yeah, I've given up on that. I'm not much of a collector. I just have piles of comic books, but I have just caved and like, all right, you can take it. It's just the drawing the line when you're like, bring back a bunch and you're like, so this one's for you. I'm like, that one looks cool. I'm like, no, you can't read the Goon. You are
That's like I have Ice Cream Man and my kid's just like, I have a 6-year-old, so I'm sitting there reading Ice Cream Man. He's like, oh, this looks cool. And I'm like, we're not quite there yet. Maybe in a few years.
You need to be 50 before you're allowed to read this.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh. So kind of speaking about things like Ice Cream Man and the kind of the horror aspects, you wrote a comic called Magda Skeleton Maker. Can you go ahead and just let us what led to this? Because the story, it actually sounds really interesting. Go ahead and give us the overview and then kind of what brought this idea up.
Yeah, so the basic outline of it is Magda is the main character, and she has issues with her vision. She kind of goes in and out of this static vision where people kind of appear as like lines in the midst of static. And at some point she sees an acquaintance who is kind of doing like a cultish ritual and kind of just joking around, but something happens and what she kind of calls a portal opens. She just sees this like ring of light and what she calls the light beast comes out of it. And she slowly realizes that no one else can see any of this and that she can only see it in this kind of static vision she has. And so she's kind of faced with this dilemma of like, there's something horrible in the world, but only I can see it. And that's a difficult thing to communicate to anyone, something only you feel or only you see because the idea of like calling the police and like, I don't know, there's like this demon thing that only I can see and I can't even see it all the time, but it's very real and it's a very serious situation. It's like not a call that inspires a lot of confidence. So she's kind of, it's not necessarily always the police, but like, friends, anyone trying to decide how you handle this. And so it's like a supernatural horror thing, but there's also kind of this interiority for her of figuring out how to navigate the world and bring the way she sees the world to other people.
That's pretty cool because it has kind of, to me, it has a deeper meaning, right? Is everybody sees the world differently, and for her, she kind of sees all sorts of, you said, staticky and different like lights, colors, lines, and then of course we have the demon beast kind of things, and that can kind of mean more to some people. So how do you communicate? How do you see to people? And I feel like that message there alone is actually, especially nowadays, right? Everyone sees the world so weirdly black and white, but things aren't always black and white.
Yeah, and there's, I think, a lot of truth to that, of even just like the things you see on social media become a truth, or the way you live becomes a truth that doesn't get seen everywhere. And I think we're often trying to figure out how to communicate that to each other and how to understand people that way. And like, I think that's the even more difficult part in real life, is being the person that's being told about that, the thing that no one else feels or sees, and learning to believe people and understand their, have empathy towards their situations.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's I think that kind of feeling was a core piece of like the itch I had to scratch with this comic book. But it was also the artist who's working on it's Donna Black, is an Irish artist who has a really unique style, and so we've talked for maybe 5 years about doing something together, because I love her art.
Yeah.
So it's kind of been sitting there as like, I really like we want to do something together. I want to write something for your style. So some of this, started to germinate too from looking at her work a lot, and feeling what, how we could do something different with her art that's already different than what you normally see in comic books. This kind of mixed media style that's very well suited to horror. And has been a lot of what the comics she's done have, really been in that genre, I think, largely. Not all, but so that was part of it too, is really getting into like the heart of her work, and trying to find the story that really suited a collaboration with her.
Right. Did you so was it, you guys both kind of had this idea, and you had your core idea of how do you get, these people to believe kind of things, mix it in with her horror, and was she like, all right, let's roll with this? Was it more of that collab effort, or was it more of, hey, I've got this idea that I've come up with, how would you like, the light beast and things like that?
Yeah, it's been in the works for so long, you kind of start to forget where the lines are between things. But it had started with, we just kind of started talking online. We're like, maybe we could do something together. And she's like, yeah, bring me a story. And so the basic premise of this I had kind of brought to her years ago. And then it was kind of like, she's like, you know what? I have a little extra time this week. Can I do a sketch or two with this? And would send me something. And I was like, okay, so, maybe adjust this, and like feeling out how this is developing visually in your mind. So it was collaborative in that way. A lot of the story just kind of came from me, but it was also, reactive to the work she was doing, and what also that I was just asking her to do things that, I think, it was slow and collaborative. So hopefully it wasn't too annoying, but there were definitely things that was like, so like, what if she really kind of can't see anything? Like, that's not a comic book. That's just a black piece of paper. Like,
you're just looking at darkness.
Yeah. I'm like, well, how do you make this look? You still want to see the characters because you're reading a comic, but make it staticky. And, so I definitely was, I would say proposing challenges to her. Maybe it wasn't all that challenging for her. And she's like, yeah, dude, I got it.
She's like, just trust me. I got this. You write the words. I'll handle the rest.
Which is definitely, I feel like, the demeanor I get from her is she's very good. Been doing this a long time. I'm probably not throwing her anything she's never seen before.
Right.
Very chill. Like, we got this.
It's always good to have somebody like that, though, because you want to bring these stories. They mean so much to us. They're coming from our minds or our hearts, things like that. And so it's important. And so to us, it can be, you might have this specific way and you might feel whether it's annoying or like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult. But to her, she was just like, man, look, I've been through this a bunch. I got you. And it's almost comforting at the same time, because then it helps you relax and tell the story that you want to tell.
Yeah. And I think especially in indie comics, it's easy for it not to be that collaborative as much as it's, I mean, comics is an absolutely collaborative art form, and you can't do it really any other way outside of, the handful of creators who can really make great books with only input from an editor. But having that trust in an artist and being able to have some back and forth is it's special. It's awesome. It makes it so much better than just handing someone a script and having them come back 6 months later and be like, here it is, we're done.
Right.
But also just that I would feel totally comfortable with that with Donna at this point too. Of like, after how much we've gone through, like, I like her art, I like the vision she brings, but I also just love that feeling too of, some panels are a little vaguer than others, and you come back and get something, you're just like, wow, that's not how I pictured this at all. And I love it. Like, this is just great. And there's one panel in particular that came back, that I think looks like a Klimt painting. I think we have it up on our Kickstarter page with like a yellow background, and it was just like, this is awesome. Like that, this is so beautiful. I'm so glad this is turning out that way.
Right.
And I think that can be the case with letterers too. There's definitely Letter Squids is doing the letters on it. Someone I've worked with on a handful of shorter comics. And I am pretty regularly surprised when I get stuff back from Letter Squids, and I'm just like, oh wow, I would have never put it that way, and it's so great. This is like so perfect. I love that. I love that part of the process, that hopefully you can have that process of discovery in writing when you're doing writing, but also to have that kind of excitement and discovery in that collaborative process keeps it so exciting.
Yeah. And like with Letter Squid, they've worked on, IDW, Image, couple. So they've got that horror background too, to kind of, all right, I know the vibe that we're working with here, which again, when you're working with people like that, it just makes the whole collaborative process so much less stressful in certain ways. Like, it's going to be stressful regardless, but in other ways, it's kind of like, okay, you know what, maybe I can take a step back from that.
Yeah. And I love that. I want to, I do a lot of writing that's just me alone, front to back. So I love that collaborative process. I love working with people. I love working with editors. I mean, if I write something and someone tells me it's absolute shit and they want to like tear it apart, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. I love that process. Working with people and refining things is, that's how things get great. And that's why, I mean,
oh yeah.
It is a part of why there's the endless discussion on social media with credits and comics, but I love that. I put all the credits in there, give everyone, I want to see who flatted this. I want to see everything, because it all speaks to each other, and it's great. It's like the greatest part about making a comic.
Yeah. Everybody plays a certain role in it. And also it's very easy for us to look at our own work and be like, oh yeah, okay, this is great. And then the editor comes back and like you said, this is total shit. And you're like, all right, cool. That's fine. Cause you almost need that. Cause you need multiple eyes on things. I know I do. I've just recently started writing, for Dork Side of the Force. I contribute over there. And so it's kind of waiting for them to come back and be like, I might think this is gold, but then it's, we got to touch this up a little bit. And you're like, all right, let's do it. Whatever.
Yeah. And I don't want to put any writers down who hate that or like, or have sensitivities around that. Cause that's totally, I mean, everyone's just got their own thing, but I do love that. I love that. That's how I know my tools will be sharpened, is
exactly
that kind of process.
I mean, nobody's perfect. There's always a way that we can make something better, whether it's ourselves, whether it's something we've written or anything of that nature. And again, I love it as well. I'm with you 100% there. It builds us, it makes us better. Cause then now you have that tool to go back and I'm like, okay, cool. Now I know how to fix it and make it better the next time I go around. Yeah.
And I also think especially for ongoing stuff with comics and stuff, this is going to be Magda's 3 issues miniseries. So I think we learn too as we go along, and react differently to each other as creators in that kind of process, and that's exciting to me. I mean, like that kind of reactive thing, like you can see it alive in these comics. I mean, I often don't even think of it when I'm reading, a 10-issue miniseries, but those creators are learning a lot off each other. They did, in most cases, they probably didn't write all 10 issues and like, here are the 10 scripts. That's not how it really works. So that change and that process is alive in those, and it's interesting and fascinating. And some comics, that first issue just like hit so hard because it was such a good idea, and I never maybe live all the way up to that. And I think like the most interesting ones to me are the ones that hit like that start of that second arc and are like, you know what? We really figured this out now. Like the script is on point now. Everything is perfect now because we've like figured each other out. I know what they want to draw. I know what I want to write. I know how to draw to those strengths. I love that.
Oh, absolutely. It's that comfortability that you kind of build up with each other. And then and how many times do we see it though? Also, whether it's a TV show or, anything like Stranger Things season 4 right now, to me was probably the best written of the series. And then we see it with comic books too, like the second arcs. Cause at that point you figure each other out. There's always that initial feeling out phase. Maybe you're not at your peak yet, but once you start gelling, we see it with sports teams, even you just gel at the right time. And there it is. That's money right there.
Yeah. And you're looking for that magic. I'm not like a toys person, but someone gave me, I don't know where it is, Steve from Stranger Things and his little ice cream get up, because I think that was one of the greatest moments of change in a character maybe that's a bit exaggerated, but I love the moment of in the first season of him coming to apologize to Will's brother and the Demogorgons there, and it's all these changes that like happening rapid fire in him is just like, it's such great writing and such a great character at that point when you're like, oh, there's depth here. They gave him love. It felt like he was going to be this surface level thing, and like they gave him this beautiful moment of change.
Well, how often have we seen too? You get that stereotypical, that douchebag boyfriend and all that. So you kind of thought exactly with Steve, for instance, you're like, oh yeah, we know how this is going to play out. He's probably going to be a character that gets killed, whatever. But he's become my favorite character in Stranger Things, without a doubt. Yeah,
the development and change in that character is just, it's so awesome. And that they stuck with it even, at the start of season 3 when Dustin comes into the ice cream shop.
Yeah.
There's that like moment of like, hey, and you're like, this is such a different character than you saw in like the first 5 episodes of season 1. It's just awesome. I love how that character's written. I mean, I don't know if it's my favorite character, the best thing about the show or anything, but it's one of those little things where you're just like, yeah, this is just a beautiful piece of writing.
Absolutely. And I can't even add to that. Like you said, it's just a beautiful, beautiful piece of writing. And to go back to Magda, you said it's a 3-issue miniseries. Was it always intended to kind of be its own self-contained story? Do you have any other idea without, spoiling? Because obviously I want to read the 3 issues. Like, was this just kind of hard to contain into 3 issues?
It wasn't for me, because I kind of knew once I had enough draft together to know this character and feel like I had a grasp on her wants and needs and what she was in this world and what her challenges were. I kind of knew found where we were going and was like, okay, this is kind of the end point here. And is there a possibility for more stuff at the end? I mean, I think there's always is. They think that it's pretty rare in comics to hit that end point and be like, you could never do anything again. But it has a pretty definite end point, at least for now.
It's always satisfying. I always feel like with indie comics too, though, it's satisfying, and it's better because you said for now, which is nice because you can always come back to that if you want to. Whereas if you're writing superheroes, nobody is ever dead, for one, and then it's like you also get constrained to other aspects. So being able to write these self-contained stories and then coming back and being, you know what, maybe I'll leave a little bit there for later, or if you want, even if you don't want to, perfect, being satisfied with that three issue arc right there.
Yeah, and I think part of it for me is a good ending can't tie up every little thing and tell you what to think.
No.
And so I at least try not to with this. We're very early on, so that's the goal with the third issue. And I think also I just haven't thought of it a whole lot because I'm just like immensely appreciative to have the chance to be working with Donna and doing these 3 issues. So anything more is like, no, I want to get through these 3 right now, and I'm just enjoying that and grateful that we get to do it. Yeah.
So how long is the Kickstarter going on, and where can people find the Kickstarter?
Yeah, so we have it. If you search Magda Skeleton Maker on Kickstarter, it's the first one that comes up. It is running until July 3rd. So we're just getting into the back half of funding this first issue. It's coming along well. We got digital versions and physical editions, and are making the comic as we go. So things are moving along right now. It's all the funny thing with, Kickstarter, where I buy lots of comics through there.
Same.
But it's such a different experience of buying it because you are buying a comic that people are like, we're actively making this right now. Like,
it's in
while
production.
You're buying it, we're probably drawing or writing or lettering or coloring. It's happening as you're buying this. Which is exciting. I mean, I like that when I'm buying those.
I do too. It's something, it means more almost to me in a way.
Yeah, and I love just I have so much leeway for artists because it's all so hard, and comics are expensive. And I got an email this morning from a project I had backed that they were like, we're behind schedule. And I just want to email and be like, it's okay, dude. Don't worry about it. And send some sketches. And I'm like, this is great. I'm just happy to see this stuff happening. And read it when it comes. There's plenty of comics, and I'll read this one when it's time.
That is absolutely true, right? There are a lot of stories, a lot of just things out there for us to read. So it's, hey, you know what? When it's there, I'm ready to read it. You go ahead, you take the time, because I'd rather you take the time and be satisfied for you personally and for the reader versus, all right, I got to get this out by this deadline. Let's rush something. And then maybe you're just left like, that really wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I've absolutely been there where you're meeting expectations and stuff. And I think, years down the line, you're right. It's just, you are going to be a lot happier if you're like, yeah, I disappointed people by being a couple weeks late, but what is that couple weeks? Like,
no.
we're going to be much happier to be happy with this product than make something that we think's worth your time. Cause I that's one thing I think is really different, as a creator using Kickstarter, is kind of that instant, like, one-to-one gratitude for anyone who is willing to read this stuff. And I realize this isn't, it's not sitting on the new comic books at the shelf when you go in on Wednesday at your favorite store. Like, it's people who put in effort and are saying, like, I believe in this. Like, you're just giving me a sense of this, and I'm willing to go with you here. I know I'm not alone in just feeling like a lot of responsibility and gratitude in that, of like, I feel that trust. I feel immensely appreciative to anyone who does that. Even if there are people who've given $1 and taken nothing, or just like buy the cheap digital version. And I'm like, that's amazing. That you would risk $4 or $3 on this is incredible. And I feel that responsibility to, even if I don't meet the time expectations, to do everything I can to meet the expectations as a comic, as a story. Cause I know that's really what people are there for.
Oh, without a doubt. I can't agree enough. And so one little last question, because I do also want to talk about the other writings that you do as well, but how different, because you write a lot of poetry. Is it hard to kind of flip back and forth between the two styles of writing, or is it just seamless to you?
It is not seamless. I did I was writing journalism and a lot of on like literary stuff at the time and music. When I was published my first poetry collection, and I could switch from there and fiction somewhat easily, but comics is just, I've been writing comics now not that long. I mean, 5 or 6 years. And it's a totally different thing. It's just, even I've written some short films, and like, it's its own thing, and it's boundless in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know, I'm looking at like some comics sitting here, like The Tick and or Ludocrats, which is just a bonkers comic. Like, yeah, there's kind of the only confines are the page and what your artist is willing to put up with. And that there's, just it took a while from, having written like screenplays where everything's very rigid to like comics is just like, now this is I think a writer had told me at one point that like the biggest difference in writing comics is that what you're writing down with, the thing you're spending your time on, even though poetry has a small audience, like your audience is one person really.
Right.
When you're writing a comic, it's that artist and no one else. And while you're like, yeah, well, I want this to be in front of people, I want there to be another artist. The script format is just about you communicating with an artist and you communicating with a letterer about what we need to put together on here. 'Cause 5% of the words you write are actually going to be in the comic.
Well, there's limited space. Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest oddities for anyone that starts writing comics from anything else is just understanding that audience bit and kind of letting go and be like, okay, just communicate with your artist. I just got to talk to someone like, this work for you? Can I just do this? Because I'm usually writing a fairly script format, but sometimes, you're right in there and you're like, I don't know, man, like this, I'm not quite sure what this looks like yet. There's just different aspects of it that feel much more like a draft, like what I write in a short story when I don't know what's going on to myself. Like, I don't know what's happening here. We're skipping this part and we'll come back to it. So yeah, it's super different. Which was, I think, what, I've loved comics for so long, but part of maybe what drew me into keeping with writing comics is just like, it's just different. It's such a unique thing. And I also just love all the possibilities. And just when you think you've read everything and like have all, like, okay, I've got all this stuff in the toolkit. You could, a nod, we could do a sound effect for a nod, or you could break the fourth wall. Like comics are weird. The next week you open up a comic and you're like, I have never thought of that. Yeah. Like this is totally new to me. Someone is, there's always someone there to surprise you and like take the next step of like, just, oh, this is a totally different way of looking at this page, or how we tell this story, or how letters interact with the picture. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of my favorite things about comic books. What draws me in is, like you said, the possibilities are endless. And I use comic books as an escape. I love these stories. I find myself just immersed in them, and it's great because there's never ever going to be a time in comic books that it's like, oh, we can't do that. That doesn't exist in my mind. And so that's what's so amazing about these. And hats off to the writers, the letters, the artists, because finding those ways, everybody thinks that making comic books is easy, but as we've talked about today, it's not easy whatsoever. It's a process.
Yeah. And it's super time consuming. I think too, when you want to, anyone who wants to start writing comics, I did a lot of short stories and anthologies before really going for this, because it was, I wanted to spend some time like really learning what it takes, for an artist to do it, because I know it's a huge lift. And for letterers, like I've done lettering myself. I'm not lettering my comic for a reason. I'm not great at it. But to understand that stuff is important too. Because it's time consuming. It's a big process. And, understanding what a colorer goes through, what a flanger goes through, you get a whole new appreciation for all these comics. And when you open up something, there are definitely times, love the art in so many comics, but there are those ones you open up and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe how long this must have taken you and like what you had to put into this and like the generative processes that led you here. It kind of floors me sometimes, and that comics are expensive. You hear people complain about it all the time when like, oh, this Black Label $7, but you also like you look at some of this art sometimes, you're like, I can't believe that's all we have to pay to see this is kind of incredible. Thinking about all the labor that went into like this spread.
It's not one person more often than not. It's that comic maybe $4 to $5, okay, or $7, but you're also there's 3, 4, sometimes 5 different people that went into this, and so that's all I have to pay for this. Awesome, I will do it 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, it's a weird economy, and art is always been that way, I guess.
It's a thankless job almost, Yeah.
I hope artists are getting thanked plenty.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. They deserve it. I have always talked about on this show how I started writing my own. I come back to it every once in a while. It's just basically beer gives people certain superpowers and stuff. And one day I'm going to pick that back up, but it's hard. And as I find out personally, and also getting to talk to all the creators that we get to speak with, it's cool hearing the perspectives and things like that. And I hope people take the time like you did to kind of put yourselves in the other shoes to be like, oh, this is what letterers do. This is kind of what artists do, because it gives you a fresh perspective and helps you add another tool into your toolkit, like we mentioned.
Yeah. And you just, you read comics different after that too. I think if you, whatever it is. And I think maybe the one that like is most accessible to most people is like really get to dive into like lettering. And like, oh, it's not just bubbles with some words in it. Like great letterers. Like, I mean, there's just, I think of letterers a lot when the best comparable is like in sports for that, like a defenseman in hockey or the kind of player you don't like when they're doing their job, you kind of don't notice them. And then after you're like, what did they do? And like often letters blow your mind and like beautiful things. But often I think the great lettering work too just goes unnoticed because you just keep reading through it and it's done its job so perfectly that you didn't notice it. It just made this just part of it. And that gets unappreciated. Letterers, they can make or break it.
It is funny. You're like in sports, if you don't hear somebody's name mentioned, especially on the defensive side of the ball, or even the puck, it's like that's usually a good thing. That's what you want because it means you're locking down, and that's what you're supposed to be doing, like cornerbacks, defensemen, things of that nature. So yeah,
they're just quietly doing the right thing.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I did want to touch upon you. As you've mentioned, you're a journalist, things of that nature. You're currently at Thrillist, but you've done a lot of really good things. I mean, you've appeared in Rolling Stone, Sports Illustrated, Men's Journal, all that kind of stuff. What kind of got you into where you're currently at with Thrillist? And more specifically, some of your articles, what is the most bizarre like food or something that you've had to write about?
Oh, man. What is it? I feel like it happens weirdly often that there's just like strange. And I guess for listeners, I write at Thrillist on the news team, so I do a lot of food and beer and alcohol and travel writing, on top of writing about comic books, some there as well. What would be the weirdest thing? I sometimes get them confused because we get you see fake foods like April Fool's Day kind of stuff, and I'm always like, I don't know, man, that could be real. That's not that's not out of bounds right now because companies will make whatever weird thing, or especially with like hot Cheetos or something.
The mac and cheese with hot Cheetos.
A vodka hot Cheetos. Ha ha ha. Like that 100% will exist next year now that you've said it.
Somebody's going to be sitting there like, write that down.
All right, so I would give the title to Jones Soda, which I have a special place in my heart for Jones Soda from like childhood of
Oh yeah.
mostly not having it, but always wanting it when I saw it. 'Cause the labels are so beautiful and the colors are really vibrant. Most years at Thanksgiving, they do a limited edition turkey and gravy soda.
That sounds awful.
And it sells out really fast most years, at least as far as I've seen. I'm not fact checking this live, but I'm pretty sure it sells out almost every year.
Wow.
And it is not like a stunt in the sense of like, oh, it's a sweet soda that like nods towards gravy. No, they have dialed this in. It tastes like turkey and gravy. It's awful.
I was going to say, it sounds awful.
And I feel like I've seen in their announcements that they're like kind of acknowledge it. And they're like, look, this is just like, it's a discussion piece for Thanksgiving. You buy it and you taste it and everyone takes a taste. And you're like, wow, no, that really tastes like,
You're like, this is shit.
Strong carbonated gravy vibes here. I got a 4-pack of it like 2 years ago. And I think I still have like 2 bottles sitting on my bar.
Oh, man.
I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Give it to someone. But that's a persistent weird one.
Yeah. It's so all right. Moving on, kind of you talked about beer and things. And so, what are your as a beer podcast? We also, for those of us who might be tuning in for the first time, we also do a live show on Thursdays where we just talk straight beer news. Lauren usually does a beer school. She crushes it. What is number one your favorite style of beer? And then outside of the city you currently live in, what has been your favorite beer city that surprised you, or just like this city is known for the best beer that I've had?
Okay. My style, I feel like this puts me in like a weird old man category if I say it, but black IPAs.
Okay. I'm so glad you said that, because that is one of the more underappreciated styles of beer. And I've been saying it for years.
It had like that brief moment of like 2 years where like breweries were actually making them and then they just disappeared.
Yes.
And then, you see them pop up every now and then. I know like Stone has done like a re-release of their like black IPA like every now and then. So you do see it every now and then, but yeah, black IPAs. I don't remember why I started homebrewing, but I think it was probably just to make a black IPA. It was like, I need to start making these. It's definitely my favorite thing that I make.
Yeah, they disappeared. Like you said, they came up briefly. There is the brewery. This is Woodland Empire, our unofficial sponsor out here in Boise. They did a Midnight Radio, which is a black IPA, which I don't know if I have any there. If I do, I will let you know, because I will have to get that to you. But it's such an underappreciated. There's just something about it that I love so much.
Yeah, it's that nice, like I think the appeal for me is, I don't mind with we're deep in the world of IPA at this point for craft. We're like decades into this. Like when people complain about it, I'm like, have you not, like, are you having beer for the first time? Of course, like there's just the stores 50% IPAs, but you can do that kind of elevated hops flavor with still having the malt have a show in here and have a say in that flavor. Cause I think there are a bunch of IPA styles now where like, if you ramp up that bitterness, it doesn't really taste that great anymore unless you're like really going like a West Coast. But black IPA can handle it and it can still have that like malty sweetness. I love that.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's everybody's, they've got 4 IPAs on tap. It's also the fastest one to make. And, so that brings them more money and things, whereas lagers take, 6 months. Stouts typically take a shorter time as well, but everyone has that. It's not stout season, which to me, stout season is year round, but that's a different topic.
Yeah. And it was already pulled out my Imperial Stout for the night.
It's stout
only
season.
Like 100 degrees out. So let's put a sweater on the inside.
Look, I'm going to be hot regardless, so at least let me enjoy what I'm drinking, because if it's hot outside, it doesn't matter what I'm drinking. I'm still going to be hot.
It's true. Yeah, it's not. Having a light beer is not going to make it not 100 degrees out.
Exactly, and I'm still going to be refreshed. So, following up that, what was your favorite beer city that is not your own?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because I go to Denver a fair amount to see some family. I mean, Denver is just obviously that great beer. I always enjoy that. But I would go with, I was impressed with, just to pick something off the map where I had a really good time, was Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Really? Okay.
It's not a ton of breweries. My wife and I, so we have family in Indiana as well, so I've done it a few times, but just kind of one day we're like, you know what, let's go to a whole bunch of breweries in town and just see what this is all about and like get a feel for it. And one after the other, I had like really good experiences, and it was a while ago now, so I won't remember all of them. Though I am wearing a Dot and Line Brewing Company shirt right now, which is a Fort Wayne brewery. Yeah, there was just a bunch of really good ones, and kind of, I was impressed that they're kind of all over the map too. And Fort Wayne's not a tiny town at all, but I've never heard anyone really talk about Indiana beer scene.
Nobody talks about Indiana, so
yeah, it was. So, but there were, I think the first one we went to was like kind of a dive bar, and I was like, this is great. This is kind of what I expected. The next place we ate at, and they had like just an outstanding menu and like this bright patio. It was just all over the place. I was really impressed. And I wish I could pull up more names of breweries for you off the top of my head. But
I did blindside you. To be fair, I kind of blindsided you that one, so it's fair.
Yeah, I wish I was more useful with it, but maybe I'll tweet them out at some point and to share it when the episode comes out and give props to the correct breweries. But I guess don't sleep on Fort Wayne. They have some good stuff.
I'll go out there. I've driven through there actually a couple times, but I've never stopped in there. So I think I'll have to go there, because it's always the smaller places that I found. Like, of course, we got your Portland, Maines, your Portland, Oregons, Raleigh, North Carolina. To me, my wife's from there, so that's a pretty good scene. Surprisingly enough, Orlando has a pretty good beer scene right now. It's up and coming, in my opinion. Most people don't think of Florida as having good beer, but as Lauren has shown me, good beer. And then, so I would have to go there. Every time we travel, I'm one of those people that's like, my wife's like, let me guess, you're looking up what breweries we can go to here and there. I'm like, well, yeah, of course I am. Like, come on. So
I should shout out Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Yeah, they have a lot.
Is also, as I just wrote about Eau Claire and have family there too. So it's been a constant in these answers, I guess. They're just places I've gone to enough to like have it hit every brewery in town. But Brewing Project, I mean, is awesome brewery.
Oh, yeah.
So good. The Gunpowder IPA is one of my favorite IPAs around. And Lazy Monk Brewing in Eau Claire is also good, really more focused on German styles, but just like this gorgeous patio over a river. And
I like the vibe of that.
Yeah. Like I'd be pretty happy to just keep going to Brewing Project over and over and over. But there's other good stuff there. And Lazy Monk's got that great view.
Absolutely. See, I do. Wisconsin in general has a lot of good beer. I've been to Madison. I've been to Green Bay. So I've been to, like Badger State and things like that. And of course, your New Glarus. But I haven't been, because it's on pretty much just on like the Minnesota border just about. So I haven't ever been out to that area. So Brewing Project is number one on the list because I've had their beer before and it is wicked good. And
they have a new space too. They opened up a new brewery almost across the street from their old spot, which I liked, the kind of like scrappiness of the old spot, but I think it's much more polished now.
Yeah. Well, you're always going to have that feel, the vibe to it, just that nostalgia factor too.
Yeah. Like, I'm sitting next to your forklift. I'm into it.
I love it. It really fits the craft beer vibe, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, Dustin, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on, chat with me today. It's been great. I've loved getting to hear about the comic book, Magda, Skeleton Maker. Go ahead, tell us where we can find you. Obviously, I'm going to put the Kickstarter in the link, all the links to your bio, all that stuff. But for those of you who might be lazy and can't take 2 seconds to read, go ahead and remind us where they can find the Kickstarter again as well. Yeah,
you can find Magda on Kickstarter. Just by searching for Magda Skeleton Maker, or I have a bit.ly link that's Magda-skeleton. I'm also on Twitter at @DLukeNelson, and got that link right in my bio, so easy to find.
Too easy. And then, yeah, we're going to be tweeting it out. Go ahead. Right after we get off this, I'm back in the Kickstarter. I've already looked through the art, all that kind of stuff. It's a story that captures me. I hope you're able to find something for you in it, and you go ahead and back some awesome people and help the indie creators as well, because they make just as good stories as the big comic books that we know and love. So give some love to some indie creators out there. And I really appreciate it again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. You are always welcome. If you want to push anything, you have a home on the show now. Go ahead. Just hit me up and be like, hey, I want to come on and talk about this. I'd be like, all right, let's make it happen. So
I got a beer in my hand and I want to talk about it.
Yeah, next time I'm going to make sure I have a beer in my hand. That is 100% sure. And as always, hopsnews.beer is our website. I have recently started contributing over at Dork Side of the Force. So go ahead and check out the articles that I'm going to be coming out with, because as we all know, Star Wars is my life. And then go check us out, Hops Geek News, on all your social media platforms. And until next time, everybody, cheers.
This has been a Hops News production. You can find Hops News on all your favorite podcasts and social media platforms at Hops News. Cheers.